cents per gallon, up more than 160% since President Bush took office, increasing on average by 34 cents a gallon each year of the Bush administration. The price of oil has also skyrocketed. A few years ago, people scoffed at the prospect of $100 oil, but American consumers have now seen an increase of $100 per barrel in the price of oil since President Bush took office. The incredible escalation of gas and oil prices is not an accident. It is the result of more than 7 years of this administration pushing an energy policy solely focused on fossil fuels. One of the Bush administration's first major actions was to convene the secret Cheney Energy Task Force, comprised of cabinet-level and other senior administration officials meeting in closed-door sessions with big oil and other industries. Not surprisingly, the recommendations from this clandestine group focused on more oil and gas drilling. On January 29, 2001, the day of the first meeting of the Cheney Energy Task Force, the price of oil was $32 per barrel. The Bush administration and the Republican Congress then passed an energy bill in 2005 that gave billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies to the oil, coal, nuclear, and gas industries. On August 8, 2005, when President Bush signed the Republican energy bill into law, the price of oil was $64 per barrel. And over the last 7 years, the Bush administration has offered big oil the rights to drill on more than 268 million acres of public land offshore. Oil companies now own the drilling rights to more land than they know what to do with. In fact, big oil currently holds more than 30 million acres, both onshore and offshore, that aren't even being used. But last week, on May 17th, as the price of oil stood at $126 per barrel, President Bush once again echoed the tired refrain we have heard for the last 7 years, that we must increase our domestic oil exploration. The price of oil is now $135 per barrel. After 7 years of filling our tanks with record-high gas and filling the calendar with new records for the price of oil, it is time to stop giving gifts to big oil. In the last 16 months, since the Democrats took control of the Congress, we have passed legislation not only to provide consumers with immediate relief at the pump, but also to reduce our oil dependence in the long term. Last year, the Democratic Congress passed an energy bill that, by 2030, will reduce our consumption of oil by nearly 3 million barrels per day. And last week, the Democratic Congress passed legislation that required the Department of Energy to stop purchasing oil at record prices to fill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But the Bush administration can and must do more to help American families right now. In a fire, you're supposed to stop, drop, and roll. And when it comes to using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help the consumers in an energy emergency, the President should stop, swap, and sell. The President must deploy, must sell the oil from the Petroleum Reserve, which has a proven track record of success in bringing down prices. Putting more oil into the global marketplace is the step which will send a signal that we are serious about reducing the price of oil globally. The administration has no problem deploying our National Guard reserves to Iraq, but to continue to refuse to deploy our oil reserves to help consumers this summer, the President says no. This weekend is the start of the summer driving season, but the Bush administration refuses to take any action that would stop driving up oil and gas prices. American families are begging for help from high energy prices, and it is time for this administration to finally heed that call. That completes the opening statement of the Chair. I now turn to recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Now, my hearing aid was on during your discussion, and it seems to me that in our three branches of government, the Congress has got some responsibility too. And with gas prices rising through the roof, signs that energy costs will rise even higher, now is the time for leadership. The Democrats today are calling for leadership from the administration, but it's Congress's job to set policy, to make important policy changes, and to make sure that those changes will result in lower fuel and electricity costs. So far, the Democratic leadership has not taken that job seriously, especially when it comes to gas prices. Instead of solutions to the nation's high energy prices, the House leadership has given the American people the Pelosi premium. Since taking control of Congress in January 2007, gas prices have risen more than $1.50 a gallon in Wisconsin under Speaker Nancy Pelosi's watch, despite her promise of a common-sense plan to lower gas prices. There's been a lot of talk from the Democratic leadership about windmills and solar panels, but those technologies are better suited for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, not energy prices. A recent report from Secretary Bodman's own Energy Information Administration shows that while solar power receives government subsidies, totaling about $24 per megawatt hour, and wind power receives about $23 in subsidies, coal power receives just 44 cents, and natural gas just gets a quarter. While there are benefits to wind and solar power, coal and natural gas are the best options for expanding electricity production at reasonable cost. I think the American people's #1 priority for Congress is lowering fuel and electricity costs, and Republicans are committed to doing that. When it comes to gasoline, Democrats have focused on fuel standards and ethanol. Higher fuel standards do have the potential to help lower fuel demand in the long run, but the American people need help now. Ethanol has caused more harm than good, as both food and gas prices continue to rise. That's why I'm supporting legislation that will repeal the subsidies and tariffs for ethanol and end this boondoggle, which I think, using a Democrat term, can best be described as corporate welfare. And while Democrats will blame energy costs on the president, the facts are clear. In the period between January 2001 and January 2007, before the Democrats assumed leadership in Congress, gas prices rose 84 cents a gallon, which is a significant jump, but nothing compared to the Pelosi premium of more than $1.50 in just 18 months. With neither a common sense plan in sight from the Democratic leadership nor an end to high gas prices, House Republicans are hearing the cries of the American people and putting forth our own plans, which are truly common sense. We will expand production of American oil and gas and do so in an environmentally safe way. There are billions of barrels of untapped oil that can be recovered without harming the environment. Nearly 85% of the offshore oil and gas fields are untapped because Congress has placed them off limits. Additionally, we must expand the refining capacity in the United States if we're going to continue to meet the surging demand for gasoline. The House Republicans' broad plan will also encourage the expansion of nuclear power, which is a technology that stands to greatly improve U.S. energy independence and greenhouse gas reductions. House Republicans will also push for greater energy efficiency by supporting conservation tax incentives to Americans who make their homes, cars, and businesses more energy efficient. And despite their costs, House Republicans also know there are great benefits to solar, wind, hydroelectric, and other sources of renewable energy, and will continue to support further development of these technologies. The primary difference between Republicans and Democrats on the issue is that House Republicans want to explore all the options that are on the table, while Democrats want to pick winners and losers. That plan hasn't worked in the past, and it won't work now. House Republicans are also pushing a plan that can help get energy costs under control. These are the kinds of policies that the Democratic leadership should be supporting too. But sadly, this kind of leadership is lacking in this 110th Congress, and for the sake of all Americans, Republican and Democrat, that's a shame. I yield back the balance of my time.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little vexed that we have my friend from Wisconsin concerned about a so-called Pelosi premium, when in fact what we are seeing is the culmination of the policies that have been put in place, a compliant Congress doing what the Republican administration has wanted to do over the course of the last 6 years. And I particularly am interested in this canard that somehow we've got to open up some of the most pristine and delicate areas like the Arctic Wildlife Refuge when there are already, of the 42 million acres of federal land currently leased by oil and gas companies, only about 12 million are currently drilled to produce oil and gas now. According to the federal government's own surveys, 82% of the gas in the outer continental shelf and 79% of the oil is available for leasing. And this is before the Republican Congress opened more space in the Gulf of Mexico for drilling in 2006. The fundamental problem here is that the United States, with 2% of the world's oil reserves and using 25% of the world's oil, cannot continue to waste more oil than any country in the world, and that we're not going to drill our way out of this problem. I think having a comprehensive energy approach, as we've been looking at on this committee, is part of it. I look forward to exploring with the Secretary as we move forward some of the trade-offs here in terms of the policies being working and what the implications are for their success or failure. But in the final analysis, it's not simply something that we're going to be able to do by ignoring the realities. We have a small amount of a declining resource. We're going to have to be able to be more efficient and give the American consumers more choices, not simply broaden the field for the oil companies that aren't already using the total amount that's been given to them that's at their disposal.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Shattuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for holding this hearing. It's important to have this discussion. As you can see, we have quite a wide divide in views on this issue. I am very pleased that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle pushed to open the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and to not add additional oil to the reserve at the moment, and even hopefully to press to release some oil from that reserve. I am also supportive of legislation that would say we should take we should be replacing some of the heavy for light oil that we are putting into the reserve. But I think it's very important to understand why that is so critical. Although the Strategic Petroleum Reserve represents only 1/10 of 1%, some experts have pointed out that at somewhere between 20% and 40% of the current cost of gasoline could be driven by speculation. And the argument goes that if we were to open the SPRO or stop putting oil in it, that might send a price signal to the speculators and they might stop speculating. The important part for that discussion is that it demonstrates that those who advocate that we don't put any more oil into the SPRO right now understand that there is a link between supply and price, because their argument is, look, by putting oil into the SPRO, we are reducing the supply for public consumption, and that's driving up cost and increasing speculation. If there is a link between supply and price, then we have to examine the policies of this Congress. I've been a member now for going on 14 years, and over that 14 years, we have had vote after vote after vote after vote after vote on the issue of either increasing domestic supply or cutting off domestic supply, either opening further areas for exploration and production or restricting further areas for exploration or production. And in vote after vote after vote, we have decided to not increase domestic production. We have decided to limit areas for exploration. I believe 2 years ago, there was legislation contemplated to expand production off the Outer Continental Shelf. The idea was to give the states a voice in that issue and to place the drilling rigs at least 50 miles offshore where they couldn't be seen. And we not only didn't pass it for oil, we didn't enact it for natural gas. Just a few months ago, last summer, the majority party imposed a moratorium on oil shale. There is a fact here, and that is this Congress has created this crisis by restricting supply. Everybody agrees that in the long term we have to pursue alternatives. I would simply say that in the short term, we cannot continue to restrict supply in the Outer Continental Shelf, in the Intermountain West, for oil shale or for ANWR, and expect prices not to go up. And I thank the Chairman for holding the hearing.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you. I was at a meeting in Napa, California a couple weekends ago of a bunch of venture capitalists and CEOs of some really exciting American businesses that are developing really, truly alternative energy sources. And so there was some talk about this issue that people thought this was such a silly debate back in Washington, D.C., about whether or not we could reduce gas prices by opening up some of the areas that we currently use for our pristine areas like the Arctic. And folks pointed out that it was really a kind of a silly debate because the fact of the matter is somehow our dinosaurs got planted under somebody else's sand. And I'm not blaming the Bush administration for that. The fact of the matter is the oil is just not there to have any appreciable impact on world oil prices. And no matter what we do, a barrel of oil is a worldwide market that is determined by worldwide supply and demand. We use 25% of the world's oil. We have less than 3% of the world's oil supply. Mr. Bodman in his testimony talked about if we opened up every spigot in Yellowstone and the Arctic and Mount Rainier National Park, we could maybe increase our domestic oil supplies by 20%. That's a worldwide increase of 0.6% increase of worldwide oil supplies that will have virtually no impact on oil worldwide barrel of oil prices. And the fact of the matter is we could drill on the National Mall and the oil price of a barrel of oil is still going to be over $130 a barrel. Now, there are some things we can do about the speculative market. But what we really need to do is to get our cars to drive on something in oil. I met a guy out in Napa, a guy named Shai Agassi. Young guys, I don't know, 35, 36 years old. Now, here's a guy we ought to be listening to. He signed a contract to totally electrify all the cars in Israel and soon Denmark. This is what we should be thinking about. We got to get off of oil ultimately in our cars. When we do that, then we'll have a transportation system that's efficient. We got to think a lot bolder than we have been. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the hearing. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us this morning. It's so interesting to sit here and think what the American people must think as they are listening to these opening statements. One of the things that we hear from constituents, they think that Congress doesn't have, and the leadership in Congress doesn't have an energy plan. They are looking at what has happened in the past 2 years to a barrel of crude when it's gone from $55 to $130 a barrel. As someone had mentioned earlier, the price of that barrel, and when I was preparing for the hearing, Mr. Chairman, we went back and looked, and the price on a barrel when President Bush took office was $30 a barrel. It varied very little until 2004 when we saw growth in the Indian and China economies. And then it really did not start to accelerate until early 2007. And the acceleration has been from that $55 mark to $130, and that has been in less than 2 years. So I do think that's noteworthy. Now, when we were doing the Energy Policy Act of '05, one of the items we discussed was getting that bill had taken a 6-year period of time to come to agreement. And there have been many times that this side of the aisle that we Republicans have pushed to address the supply and the capacity issue. We did it in the '05 Act. We had a bill that followed the '05 Act in October of '05 that dealt with that issue. We had pressure from the Democrat side of the aisle to not address those capacity and supply issues. And what we know is that our constituents and the American people want to see this issue solved. To address the price at the pump today, we are going to have to talk about supply, capacity, about energy exploration, about energy independence, and begin to look at what we do in the short term, the mid-range, and the long-term on these issues. Americans want American solutions. We are the most innovative people. We certainly can figure this one out. We know that there are barriers that have been placed in front of extraction in front of exploration. Mr. Chairman, we need to remove those barriers, get the price down at the pump, and have a long-term plan. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have to suspend belief when you listen to our distinguished colleagues on the other side, and I think it was called the Pelosi Premium.
Yep.
I didn't realize that Nancy Pelosi was in those behind closed doors meeting with Dick Cheney as they were putting together the master plan for their energy strategy that is in its current 8th year. I didn't realize she was in on those meetings, but perhaps I'm wrong. Our colleagues who used to be known as the Grand Old Party are giving new meaning to GOP, primarily inasmuch as they have become to mean gas, oil, and petroleum, and protecting those interests at all costs. You have to suspend your belief, because I think our colleagues over here have been a little bit unfair. They do have a policy, an energy policy, and Thomas Friedman has talked about it frequently. It's called Leave No Moolah Behind. Because what we end up doing is, by the monies that we're sending overseas that work their ways through the massages and into the hands of the very people that are assaulting and killing our men and women over in the Middle East. And meanwhile, as gas prices continue to go up because of policies that were made behind closed doors with no oversight and review, with speculators that are running unbridled and over the counter with an invisible market where they're able to jack the price up minimally 10 to 40%, so that people in my district who get their Social Security check have to sign it over to the oil dealer to pay for their heating of their homes. This was the work of Nancy Pelosi, I'm told. This is the work of an administration that hasn't had a policy, and people on the other side of this aisle who continue to block initiatives that would otherwise lead to our independence and non-reliance on the Middle East for foreign oil, and embrace the alternatives that we know will provide a greener environment, the jobs that we need, and get away from this path that we've followed down. And with that, Mr. Chairman, though I could speak for several more minutes, I reserve my time.
That would be the Irish side of the gentleman, not the Swedish, that would like to speak longer, and I appreciate it. Gentlelady from California, Ms. Solis, is recognized.
It's going to be really hard to follow. But I, too, want to join my colleagues here and thank our Chairman Markey for having this important hearing. It's nice to have you here with us, Secretary. As you know, you can hear our frustration. And I guess my concern again is, in your testimony, you believe that we can do more here. We can actually cultivate more energy resources by drilling and opening up previous leases along our coast and what have you. Well, that's a no-starter for many of us. So how can we really talk candidly and really talk about exploring renewable energies and investment in home resources here in the United States? And yesterday, most of my colleagues, I think, on the dais here supported renewing credits, tax credits, so that we can invest in solar energy and renewable energy. We need to do more, and I just am waiting to see what incentives and innovative ideas that your office and through your leadership can provide. Every day that we go home to our districts, every weekend at least, that gas price keeps inching up. In my district now in Los Angeles, it's been well over $4 for the last 3 weeks, if not a month. And that doesn't even explain the other costs that are being applied to consumers when they go to the grocery store, because all the diesel fuel also has gone up dramatically, and it hits very hard upon our low-income working class, blue-collar communities that right now we seem to be ignoring. And I'm standing up for that little guy and that little woman out there that's trying to make it to school to take her children or to make it to her part-time job that really has no voice at this table. And I'm hoping that there's something realistically that we can do other than just holding our hands up and saying, well, gee, we can't get the oil corporations to do anything about it, and oh my God, we pay so much in taxes. Well, Jesus, when you talk to the regular Joe or Mary on the street, they're saying the same thing. And our frustration is very, very real. This economy, we don't have support by the American public. The direction is wrong. And one of it hits home very clearly, and that's in our pocketbook. When we go home to our districts, whether it's in California, whether it's in New York, Miami, Florida, or in Texas. So I would just hope you could enlighten this committee with some innovative ideas. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from South Dakota, Ms. Herseth Sandlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. If you look at my district, the entire state of South Dakota, from end to end, whether it's our vast fields of corn and soybeans on the eastern side of the state, wind across every part of the state, and the great forests of the Black Hills in the west, South Dakota embodies the idea that we need a diversified approach to our national energy policy. And in particular, we need to take advantage, as Ms. Solis was saying, of new opportunities for renewable energy. So as we strive to meet our national energy needs, we must continue to recognize, I think, that rural America has much to offer, and rural states should be at the center of the solution as our national energy policy shifts and adjusts in ways that can enhance our national and economic security, promote innovation and conservation, and ultimately ease the strain on the budgets of families and businesses. Now, with the passage of the original renewable fuels standard in 2005 and then the aggressive increase included in last year's energy bill, we've already taken some initial key steps in the right direction as we seek to take advantage of the contribution of agricultural producers in rural states to reduce our dependence on foreign oil and the overall carbon emissions through an increase in production of biofuels, wind, and other types of renewable energy. I respectfully disagree with the ranking member, the gentleman from Wisconsin, on the impact of ethanol. Ethanol has kept gas prices from going even further, upwards of 15% higher than they are today, and the price of corn to make ethanol has very little to do with the increase in food prices when compared to other factors like the cost of energy and the processing and transportation of food. So I look forward to your testimony on these and other issues, in particular infrastructure issues for the transmission of wind energy. Thank you for being here, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Chairman Markey and Ranking Member Sensenbrenner. I'd like to welcome the Secretary to this hearing. It is difficult to refute our current administration's poor record on environmental protection and renewable energy promotion. For example, the administration has consistently lobbied for drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, as if the oil there contains gold-plated gas, which would solve our growing greed for gasoline. The administration has also continued to support the oil and gas industry in terms of subsidies. Alcoholics Anonymous does not encourage its participants to visit more bars as a means of reducing their dependence on alcohol. Likewise, the solution for our energy crisis is not more drilling. For this reason, Congress is attempting to change the course of American energy policy by passing meaningful and effective legislation. Just this week, the House passed H.R. 6049, the Energy and Tax Extenders Act of 2008. If it becomes law, this important bill will extend expiring tax provisions for renewable energy production and energy conservation. The progressive Pelosi policy has promoted renewable sources of energy and energy efficiency and conservation, but we must have support from the current administration if we are to be truly successful. And I hope, Mr. Secretary, that you can offer some insight into the policies promoted by this administration, and that we can work together to the extent possible to reach energy independence and achieve a cleaner environment for all Americans. Thank you for being here. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York State, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. America is clearly at an energy crossroads, and one look at oil costs or conversations with families in my district or others around the country who are being forced to sacrifice more to keep on the lights and the heat and the fuel in their vehicles is all the evidence one would need to come to that conclusion. It's our job in Congress to look at how we got here, what our government is doing to solve the crisis, and I'm disappointed that when one looks back over the last 7 years, it's apparent that the administration has pursued what I see as sort of a lose-lose-lose policy, where we are shipping more and more of our dollars to unstable countries in unstable parts of the world, where they are used, as one of the other members mentioned, to fund, in part to fund madrasas or arming of these governments who we may have disagreements with about human rights or other foreign relations issues, and then borrowing that money because we're running a deficit at the same time and a balance of trade deficit. We're basically borrowing the money from other countries and finding ourselves losing our sovereignty. So it's lose-lose-lose policy, and I would like to see us move toward the win-win-win policy, where we're developing the new technologies that provide jobs here and keep our dollars here in this country, and at the same time get us our sovereignty back. This is not an ideological statement. It's an empirical one, looking at oil prices that are breaking daily records, hitting $135 per barrel overnight. Gas prices have more than doubled since 2001. In New York, they're over $4 a gallon. Until recently, the administration has shown resistance to providing short-term relief through timely use of the SPR, and I'm glad that the administration has now chosen to agree with Congress on this issue and halt deliveries to the SPR to provide some relief on the demand side. However, the long-term solutions to our energy prices remain somehow inexplicably tied to a drill first, ask questions later mentality. While private investment is driving renewables by wind and solar to grow by leaps and bounds, we're somehow being told that we really need to keep trying to bring them along and at the same time throw more money at the oil industry, as the Energy Act of 2005 did, with subsidies that we've been trying to take back, tax breaks to an industry that's already claiming record profits, and also throwing more money down the nuclear rabbit hole, dozens of years and billions of dollars in taxpayer-financed largesse. And I just would comment that I think the ranking member said we shouldn't be picking winners and losers. We've always picked winners and losers. The taxpayer is the insurance company that indemnifies the nuclear industry since the Price-Anderson Act, for instance. So the question is not whether we pick winners or losers, but whether we pick the right ones. The path we need to follow is one that has been advocated by this Congress, focuses on green, domestic, innovative solutions that will reduce our reliance on old forms of energy and drive rather than drain our economy. I remain an optimist, and I hope that even in its last 6 months, the Bush administration can turn a corner and join with Congress to realign the priorities that meet this vision. And I yield back.
Okay, gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Bodden, for agreeing to come to talk to us today. In this committee, we're taking a broad look at all our options to reduce our dependence on imported oil. We've seen the benefits of pursuing renewable energies and the startling savings that are available through energy efficiency measures. I'm concerned that despite the administration's rhetoric, the only action that we've seen is the push for more domestic drilling, including going to the length of preventing my state of California from requiring our vehicles in California to have more fuel efficiency. You know, I've had a constituent literally yell at me in my face last weekend because he was so humiliated to see the president go hat in hand to Middle Eastern countries to beg for oil. I agree with that sentiment, and I implore this administration to take real steps toward attaining independence by allowing states to lead the way. Mr. Bodden, thanks again for coming. Let's stop the rhetoric and start working together to find solutions. I look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. All time for opening statements from the committee members has expired, and we turn to our witness, the Honorable Samuel Bodman, who is the Secretary of the Department of Energy. Secretary Bodman has led the Department of Energy since February of 2005. He also served in the administration as Deputy Secretary of Treasury and the Department of Commerce. He was also the CEO of Fidelity and also the Cabot Corporation, both up in Boston. And we welcome you, Mr. Secretary. Whenever you are ready, please begin.
Chairman Markey, Congressman Sensenbrenner, members of the committee. I want to thank you all for providing me the opportunity to speak with you about America's energy and environmental challenges. These are very serious issues in my judgment. They're deserving of serious consideration, which in my judgment begins with the recognition that distinct energy challenges and unique constraints are creating a new global energy reality. Our response to this new reality is based on the fundamental premise that energy insecurity poses an unacceptable risk to the United States national security and our economy. Implicit in the new energy reality is the recognition that energy issues must be assessed and addressed in a global construct. Today, coal produced in South America is used to generate electricity in Europe. Oil drawn from Africa is used to power cars in Asia. Liquefied natural gas from Trinidad powers homes and businesses in the United States. America can no longer consider its energy security as largely a domestic issue. To illustrate what I'm talking about, consider this new reality's three underlying causes. One, an extraordinary surge in global energy demand. Two, resource limitations coupled with increasing geopolitical instability. And three, the likelihood that some type of carbon constraints are an eventual part of the world's energy future. These challenges, the challenges that these underlying causes present are considerable, and the administration, in my view, has been quite vigorous in its efforts to address them. This administration has, since 2001, spent more than $22 billion to research, to develop, and to promote alternative energy sources and to reduce energy demand. In 2006, the President proposed the Advanced Energy Initiative as a comprehensive plan to change the way that we power our homes, our businesses, and our automobiles. The Department of Energy is moving ahead with a loan guarantee program that will assist in the development and commercialization of clean alternative energies that by systems that are providing up to $42 billion in loan guarantees. These initiatives, coupled with our other efforts, have led us to an approach which I believe can be distilled into four principal areas of focus. One, the development of energy from a more diverse set of sources such as oil shale and advanced biofuels, coupled with efforts to expand production on traditional forms of energy into areas such as the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the Outer Continental Shelf. The development and deployment of innovative technologies, such as those pursued by the Department's Vehicles, Technologies, and Building Technologies programs. These programs provide producers and consumers with ways to substantially increase energy efficiency at all levels of economic activity. Three, the development and deployment of low-carbon or no-carbon energy technologies such as carbon capture and storage, wind, solar, and clean, safe nuclear power. And four, the development and deployment of an expanded U.S. energy infrastructure to include additional refineries, expedited siting for pipelines, and improvements to the electrical grid in order to handle the need for increased capacity safely, and securely. Any one of these areas that I named, those 4 areas, requires considerable commitment. Together, they represent an opportunity for this nation to excel and to lead. I continue to be confident that we are laying the groundwork necessary for investment and innovation to occur. The results are not going to be immediate, but our efforts eventually will come together to increase America's energy security and to provide economic relief to the U.S. taxpayer. In addition, they will provide environmental relief by changing the impact of our energy consumption and altering the ways in which we produce energy. To that end, between 2001 and 2008, this administration has invested more than $45 billion toward activities related to climate change science and technology. In April of this year, the President set a new national goal for stopping the growth of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2025. But that reduction in emissions will take place only so long as the necessary technology continues to advance, which is an important mission for this department. It will require the cooperation of the world's major economies, an effort that the President proposed and is leading, and the cooperation of Congress, state and local governments, businesses, entrepreneurs, investors, as well as academia. In my judgment, there is considerable reason for optimism. Having spent many years in the nation's financial sector, I can honestly say that for the first time in history, we're seeing the venture capital community putting sizable amounts of money into entrepreneurial companies in the alternative energy business. One recent industry report showed that the so-called clean tech sector, which includes renewable energy and efficiency technologies, experienced record venture capital investment levels of $2.2 billion in the year 2007, up from just $500 million in the year 2005. That, by almost any measure, is quite remarkable in terms of its growth. Mr. Chairman, each of us, in my view, has a part to play in increasing America's energy security. Developing new technologies is not enough. Implementing new policies is not enough. And it is not enough to simply devise new incentive schemes or to open new areas for production. All of these can and should contribute to increased U.S. energy security, and they must be done in concert with one another. They must be pursued with an understanding of the facts of the new energy reality. Our economic and national security future is largely dependent upon our energy future. Mr. Chairman, at this time I would like to conclude my remarks by asking that my written testimony be a copy of which I think has already been provided, that be entered into the record, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and without objection, the Secretary's entire testimony will be entered into the record at this point. The Chair now recognizes himself for a round of questions. Mr. Secretary, we know that swapping and releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has a proven historical track record of success. President Bush's father in 1991 deployed the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Prices dropped by 1/3. When President Clinton deployed the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, prices dropped by 18%. And when President Bush deployed it after Hurricane Katrina, there was a reduction of 9.1%. Why is President Bush refusing to answer this historical challenge by deploying the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, by now sending millions of barrels of oil out into the open marketplace that will have, obviously, looking at the historical record, a depressing effect upon the price of oil?
Well, the goal, Mr. Chairman, is to provide security for this country. That's what the purpose of the SPRO is. And the SPRO is there, it is meant to deal with matters where we have the physical delay, interruption of the flow of oil to our country. We don't have that issue today, and that's the reason.
Well, we did not have that in 1991. We did not have that in in the year 2000 when President Clinton deployed it. We did not have that, in fact, when the President deployed the SPRO after Hurricane Katrina. In each one of those situations, there was not an international crisis that was going to have some permanent effect upon our access to oil. You understand what I'm saying here? What we've got here is last Friday, President Bush asking the Saudis to please produce more oil because it would have an effect on reducing the price of oil for American consumers. The Saudis said no. But we have 700 million barrels of oil stored that are ready to be deployed that will have the same effect if President Bush was willing to use it right now because of the speculation in the oil marketplace that nothing is going to happen. Why won't you recommend to President Bush that he deploy the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, given the historical successful record?
I don't know how to be clear with you, sir. First of all, there was in 2005, I don't know about the other cases, but there certainly was an interruption of supply that was caused by the hurricanes. And that we had requests for the availability of oil, and we responded with the availability of oil.
Don't you believe that there is now rampant speculation going on in the oil futures marketplace that is artificially driving the price up exponentially almost on a daily basis?
I don't. No, I don't.
You don't believe there's speculation right now? You don't believe that this is just a...
Let me explain why, if I may.
Sure.
If you look back over the history of oil production globally, it increased by about 1 million barrels per day per year, so that each year, as you moved along, it increased by roughly 1 million barrels a day, until you got to the year 2004. In the year 2004, we had almost an increase of 3 million barrels a day of consumption. In the year 2005, 6, and 7, we have had flat production. There has been no change in the global production of oil over that period of time. And the facts are that in the year 2004, we sopped up all the available spare capacity in the system. And that's been the issue. That is the issue today, and it is clear to me that when you look at very little spare capacity in the system, and you look at the ability of price to reflect the increase in demand. If you have a 1% increase in demand, my economics friends tell me you have about a 20-fold increase in price, so that for every 1% increase in demand, I've got a 20% increase in price. It's easy to see that we've got that kind of situation going on at the current time.
Well, we've seen over the years 1% increase in demand, but we've never seen a spike like we have seen over the last year.
And that is because in the year 2004, we sopped up all the additional capacity of the system.
Mr. Secretary, what you're testifying here today is that you're not going to recommend to President Bush that he use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a weapon against Saudi Arabia, against OPEC, to tell them we are not going to stand on the sidelines and that we are going to actively send more oil into the marketplace. That over the next 10 years, you might have a plan to drill in wilderness areas in our country, but over the next 10 weeks, this summer, there is no plan that the Bush administration has to reduce the price of oil. And the one weapon you have, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a proven weapon of success against OPEC, you are not going to deploy, notwithstanding Saudi Arabia turning a deaf ear to President Bush's request last Friday.
First of all, Saudi Arabia did increase the production by some 300,000 barrels.
But not in response to the President. They said that's something they had already done, but in response to the President.
I assume that is the case, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
But the situation is that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is meant to be there as a protection for the American people.
The American people right now are being, Mr. Secretary, the American people are being tipped upside down at the pumps and having money shaken out of their pockets. Ford just announced that they are going to cut 15% production in the manufacture of vehicles this year. Right. Airlines are declaring that they're on the verge of bankruptcy. The American people are under assault from the skyrocketing price of oil, and the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the one weapon in the short run we have to stop this bubble from continuing to ravage the American economy and the American people, and we must use it now.
I disagree with you, sir.
Well, I think it's a disagreement that's really going to hurt our economy. My time has expired. I recognize now the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There's another way I think we can reduce the price at the pump, at least those of us that have to buy gas that has 10% ethanol in it, and that is repealing the tariff on imported ethanol, which is a protection for the U.S. ethanol industry that's reflected in the pump, at least in those of us who live in areas where there has to be this kind of a blend. Does the administration have any plans to reduce or eliminate that tariff?
I think that the administration would deal with the questions related to the tariff by working with Congress. We're happy to work with Congress about that, on that subject.
Doesn't the administration have the power to do this administratively, however?
I don't believe so, sir.
Okay, so it does require an act of Congress?
I believe so, yes, it does.
Well, if it does require an act of Congress, will the administration request that we consider legislation to repeal this tariff?
I don't have a good answer to that offhand, but I'd be happy to get it for you.
Well, I would appreciate that. You know, I'll give Mr. Markey some of my time since he used a bit of it in his round of questioning, but it seems to me that we ought to have everything on the table. And we hear an awful lot of ranting about big oil, and a lot of that ranting is deserved. But I also think that big corn has got an oar in this equation as well, because of the protection against cheap ethanol coming into the market that's produced outside this country. I would just very strongly urge the administration to put on a full court press to reduce the tariff, and maybe at least with the 10% of the petroleum that we get at the pump, we can reduce the cost of that, which will bring down the total cost. I thank the gentleman. Yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Your phraseology here, I think, is important when you talked about new energy realities that I think we're all trying to adjust to. You've been clear in your testimony and prior comments that we're dealing with a global energy market that is being affected by things that are happening around the globe, and that there is no one source. It's all sort of blended together. And you just finished saying that results won't be immediate, that there are certain lag time that's going to be required as these things work their way through the system and adjustments are made in production and whatnot. I'm curious if you have a perspective on what that lag time is before there are things that ripple their way through the energy production system, 6 months, 6 years.
Yeah.
What would you think in your position would be a realistic
I think it varies, sir, according to which form of energy you're thinking about. On oil, we have already, I think, seen a turn where for the first time we have a turn in the percentage of oil that we import. For the first time in some years, it's declined. And I think that is a indicator that if the non-OPEC producers continue to do what they are intending to do, that we will see a success there. Nuclear power, I would expect that we would see nuclear power and the licensing of and the proposals for nuclear power in a serious way. I think we now have 4 reactors that have been applied for.
My time is limited, and
right.
I want to get at this notion of, if we have a sense of lag time, are we talking months, years, on an overall energy situation?
I think we're talking years. We're going to be talking a few years to see in biofuels, which is the whole question that the chairman raised the issue about. In biofuels, we are looking at by the year 2012, that's 4 years out, that we're going to have biofuels, cellulosic biofuels that will be cost competitive with corn.
Well, we're looking here from a historic perspective. In May of 2001, when your predecessor was on the Vice President's Energy Task Force, their vision was put in place, and at that time, gas prices were $1.70. In 2005, you said that 95% of the administration's energy policy had been implemented, and that we're looking at $2.07 a gallon for gasoline. Then we had the Energy Policy Act in August of 2005, which the President claimed was going to make a big difference for every American. A year later, there was a big celebration in the Department of Energy celebrating the first anniversary of the passage of that. I'm trying to get a sense now. We've had the administration in control since 2001. You had a Congress that in the main was very much in agreement with the administration, compliant, giving you what you wanted, and much of it was implemented, and it's been now 6-7 years.
Right.
Are the $4 a gallon prices that we're seeing now a result of the success of the energy policy that's been in the pipeline now for some 7 years?
I would say not, sir. I would say, however, that when you quoted me as saying that 95% of the energy policy of the administration had been implemented. That is not correct. If that's what you claim that I said, I don't recall having said that.
But then let me reframe that. It's been 7 years. You've had an administration that's gotten virtually everything that's wanted from Congress. It's been in place, and I grant you that it takes a year or 2 or 3 to work its way out. Shouldn't we be seeing the results? Are we seeing the results of the Bush energy policy?
We are starting to see the results, yes. Just as I indicated, that the percentage of oil that we are importing has started to turn. That the American public is fed up with the high prices, I recognize that. I am acutely aware of that. I hear about it every day. And it is something that you and I have in common, I'm sure. But it's also something that I think we are looking to for decades. We have been 30 years without appropriate research having been done on renewable energy, on solar energy, on wind energy, and this takes a long time to accomplish. And so it is something that is years away in my judgment.
Thank you very much. Just for your records, my understanding is that you did say that on March 9th, 2005. And if I'm in error,
I don't recall having said that.
I'm giving you a specific date. If I'm in error, I will correct that if you did not in fact say that on March 9th, 2005.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I think you said several times that you expected the world to be operating in a carbon-constrained economy at some point in the future. And I want to ask, is that something you believe should happen? Do you believe that we should be taking actions to deal with global warming to restrain the growth of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases? Or are you simply saying that you're resigned to that happening and you can't stop that from happening?
It should happen, and we are doing everything we know how to do to accomplish that.
So you think we should be doing all we know how to be doing to accomplish a reduction in greenhouse gases?
Yes, I do.
Great. I agree. I do too. I think we might disagree on whether we're doing that, however. I want to ask you about a cap-and-trade system, which we know how to do because we invented it in the United States. It's worked marvelously in sulfur dioxide with zero, probably net zero costs to the U.S. economy. Europe is now engaged in it on their second round that they've learned some lessons on, and they're now going to improve some of the stakes. We have an American system that we know works. We have a system that has been proposed in the Senate. I believe it's passed the committee over there, and we have a proposal many of us in this dais are supporting here for a cap-and-trade system. To me, it is real clear that absent that, we won't be able to achieve the carbon constraint that you indicate is necessary. Last time you were here, I asked if you'd spoken to the President about the cap-and-trade system, and you indicated you had not. Could you tell us what the administration plans are if we send you a cap-and-trade bill this year, whether the President will sign it, and if you can describe the cap-and-trade system that the President will sign? We are most anxious to receive some leadership from the White House.
The President laid out issues related to greenhouse gas control that he would be prepared to support, reasonable and achievable goals that encouraged the investment in new technology, that worked on nuclear power, that encouraged the use of coal, that all nations need to be included in the program, and that we remove trade barriers. Those were, as I recall it, those were his 5 or 6 different points. He has laid that out. I will tell you, sir, that I have now been in this administration 7.5 years, and I have spent a lot of my time at Commerce and then at Treasury and now at Energy negotiating with the Chinese over their exchange rates, and we have made this much progress. And I would tell you that I think it's a mistake for the President to unilaterally declare what he is prepared to do prior to undertaking this whole major economy series of meetings, which he has been doing. And it is my view that he is correct in the way he's going about dealing with it.
Well, that's excuse me. Didn't mean to jump on you like that. Excuse me. That's very disappointing because essentially you've said that the President will not join us in embracing a carbon-constrained effort in the United States during his remaining term of office.
I didn't say that.
Well, it's obviously we're not going to have a global agreement by January 20th, 2009, and what you've basically said is America is going to secede from its historic destiny of leading the world in these matters and taking a back seat and refusing to act till China, agrees. And I think that's a huge mistake for several reasons. Number one, we didn't wait for China to develop democracy before we acted. We are the world's leader. We are the world's largest polluter, and we've got both a moral obligation to act, but more importantly, an economic opportunity here. I mean, I met people yesterday in my office that, signing solar thermal contracts for the first solar thermal plants.
Right.
We've got great strides in solar photovoltaic. We got great strides in enhanced geothermal. We got guys making all-electric cars starting in June. We got the young man I talked about signing a contract to electrify the whole state of Israel. But those people can't get the help of the White House to send a signal to the markets that they need to invest in these new companies because there's going to be a price on carbon. It's very, very disappointing. And I just have to tell you that, when the world looks back at all of our terms here, I just wish you could spend the next few months figuring out how to achieve a constraint on carbon in the U.S. economy that can drive investment into these new technologies. I think we're missing a huge opportunity here. I'm very disappointed in your position.
Well,
you can comment.
I would just say that that particular company that you mentioned, to my knowledge, they have gotten a lot of investment, and that they're pretty well fixed.
Clearly, but the venture capital community, I met with 12 of them here in an office, in fact, in this building 2 weeks ago, and they said, look, as long as the fossil fuel guys can put their pollution in the sky for free in unlimited amounts, we're not going to get this job done. You're letting the guys, it's like putting their garbage in a dump truck, back it up to the city hall parking lot and dump it all for free. As long as the fossil fuel guys can do that, we're not going to get the quantum leap we need so we lead the world and become the arsenal of clean energy like we were the arsenal in freedom. It's very disappointing. We're going to have to do work starting in January. Thank you.
Great. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from South Dakota, Ms. Herseth Sandler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, late last year, the results of a study co-sponsored by your department were released supporting the possibility of mid-range ethanol blends, such as E20 or E30, that can enhance fuel economy for some non-flex fuel vehicles. And an update last month from the department on its intermediate ethanol blends testing recognizes the urgent need for continued and expanded testing based on the new RFS and the anticipated saturation of the E10 market. The update reports that the department will have at least 160 test vehicles online this month, and I'm glad to see is also evaluating the effects of higher ethanol blends on smaller engines such as pressure washers. So 2 questions. When do you expect definitive results on the effect of intermediate ethanol blends on most engine families? And has the department considered evaluating higher ethanol blends over E20?
To my knowledge, we have not considered, to take your second question first, we have not considered above E20, and we are testing various engines for E15 and E20, and that would be enough to encourage the development of the ethanol industry. The concern is that with the concentration of the production of ethanol only in the Midwest, that we will not encourage the nationwide adoption of ethanol, and we need to do that, and that a way to stimulate that would be to increase the availability of E15 and E20.
So what exactly, I'm not sure I follow what the concern is about testing E30 at the same time.
We can test anything, but the E20 is enough to get us through
beyond the saturation of the E10 market.
The whole issue related to E10.
And then when do you expect those definitive results?
I don't have a quick answer for you on that, and I'd be happy to get it for you.
Okay, if you could.
Sure.
On wind energy, I was encouraged to see...
Wind energy?
Wind, yes.
Yeah.
Your department released its 20% report earlier this month, concluding that wind energy could contribute as much as 20% of the nation's electricity by 2030 while significantly reducing the carbon footprint. And Assistant Secretary Andrew Karsner was quoted as saying that this can happen for less than half a cent a kilowatt hour. So what do you think are the key steps Congress must take this year and next to make this possible? And what do you think is key to facilitating the siting of new transmission infrastructure, given that the report also states that transmission must be categorized with the interstate highway system?
Well, I think the issue related to transmission is something that we would encourage. I think we have enough tools to encourage that. We have the so-called electricity office I think it's energy reliability and electricity delivery, and that office, headed by Kevin Kolovar, I just had a session with them night before last with an advisory committee that represents those from all over America dealing with this question. So I think we have, to my knowledge, we do not need work from Congress, but I would be happy to come back to you again if that proves to be otherwise.
So you're confident that there is enough incentives that currently exist for private investment alone to
I
move
think so.
forward with the building of the transmission
I think so.
capacity?
I think so, based on my discussions with the participants in that industry.
How about the production tax credits? Would you favor the extension of the production tax credit for wind energy production?
There again, we'll be happy to work with Congress to do that.
Do you think that that's key in order to get to the point where we can meet the 20%?
It would appear that it is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I just want to get clear up something that I'm not sure was clear earlier when you responded to Mr. Blumenauer. Are you saying or suggesting that Saudi Arabia agreed to increase production to 300,000 barrels a day as a result of the request from President Bush?
I do not know. I don't know that. I haven't been told that, so I don't have a quick answer for you. I do know that they did agree that day, apparently, according to, I guess, the chairman, that was not, that was something that they'd already agreed on ahead of time. I don't know.
Yeah, that was my understanding, and so I just wanted to get that cleared up.
I don't know.
The Saudis have responded to the request by the President by saying that the price of oil is impacted more by the weakened U.S. dollar than anything else. Do you agree with their assessment?
No, sir, I don't.
Why not?
For the reasons that I just mentioned, that production has been flat for the last 3 years, having had a big jump up in 2004. Whenever you have a situation where we know that demand is increasing, demand from China, demand from India, and even a small increase from here, when you have a situation like that, you can get the current kind of pricing environment where you have flat production and you have very little upside in terms of availability.
It seems to me that the market is madly searching for any excuse to raise the price of oil.
I can't comment on that, sir.
Well, I mean, the price of oil appears to be raised on all events. Whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a loss by the Washington Nationals. I mean, whatever happens, it seems as if they raise the price of oil.
Fortunately, the Nationals seem to be losing a lot, so that.
Yeah, they ran out of gas early, but I'm just. I mean, you mentioned Katrina earlier. The administration seems to think that to solve the problem, we just drill in the wildlife refuge. The Saudis say it's to weaken U.S. dollar. I mean,
that's not what I said. I said that we need everything. We need not just. So this isn't going to yield to drilling in Anwar or any other place. I think I acknowledged that in my opening remarks. We need everything. We need solar energy. We need wind. We need nuclear power. We need biofuels. We need coal, carbon capture, sequestration, all of it, in order to deal with this issue.
Greater nuclear power.
Yes, sir.
Do you have some suggestions on where we will store the waste?
We are working very hard on the whole Yucca Mountain program, and next, I guess it's 2 weeks, or a week from next Monday or Tuesday or so, we are scheduled to file the application.
So you're going to go ahead in spite of the fact that all the Nevada members of Congress and the governor all opposed?
I am going ahead because I am acting as the agent of Congress and the President, as best I know. Congress has opined on this matter, as well as the administration, and our job is to execute.
Yeah, the point, where are you from?
This is a filing of a license with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Does it, I mean, do you support the construction of new nuclear facilities?
Yes, I do.
Where?
Where?
Yes, sir.
That's something to be looked at on a state-by-state basis, wherever the states decide they want to put them.
Including your state?
I'm a resident of the district, but I don't think that there is likely to be any being put in the district.
Now, the praise of the Bengal tiger increases with the distance from the jungle. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York State, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. A couple of observations. I think you said that the administration between 2001 and 2008 has spent about $45 billion on measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And if
First it was on both the science and the technology.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. I just want to point out that's a little bit less than 4 months of what we're spending in Iraq. Just as a matter of, I know this is off topic. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but I just think in terms of national priorities, it's important to say it.
I understand.
And you also said at one point during your testimony that the results from many of these technologies we're looking at are not going to be immediate. You also said each of us has a part to play.
That's correct.
And I would suggest that if each of us, perhaps you as Secretary of Energy might make a statement, or the President in his position of the bully pulpit can make a statement, that it's patriotic, not just wise in terms of climate and the economy, but patriotic to drive in the most fuel-efficient manner possible, drive the most fuel-efficient vehicle, buy the most fuel-efficient vehicle possible, try to use as little energy as you can. And that actually would have an immediate impact. You agree? Or?
I agree with that.
So there are some things that can have an immediate impact.
I agree. I think that's probably
And even
right.
a short-term impact, like, for instance, the Idaho National Laboratory has done studies of low-head hydro sites in, I believe, all of the states, but in particular those states that have changes in elevation that lend themselves to it. In New York, the Idaho Laboratory's website shows 4,000 some low-head hydroelectric sites, small dams, and waterfalls that are currently not being used for hydro generation, and estimates that greater than 1,200 megawatts of power could be harvested by putting turbines where water is already falling and wiring that into the grid. Something that would have a short-term effect. I would guess a serious effort, a top priority effort to harness this unused hydropower, which, by the way, would hire mechanics and electrical workers and tradespeople to do the installation, and of course has the advantage of not being a single large point source, but being a lot of small point sources that are spread out over the grid. Would in fact hire a lot of people besides generating a lot of power. I just wanted to throw that out as something.
I agree with all that.
So maybe we could work with the administration to try to make that happen. I don't know. I'm sure there are liability issues with some of these dams that are orphan dams and so on, or some may need to be indemnified and repaired. But if we can indemnify the nuclear industry, I suggest we should put renewables on the same footing. Either none of them get indemnified, or we look at helping the ones that need it. I wanted to ask you about there was one aspect of the administration's budget that I was curious about. The committee has explored the potential to make massive improvements in efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions by making buildings more efficient.
Right.
Actually, I commend my friend from California and his state's efforts to reduce electrical consumption. While the rest of the country has had this curve going upward, California has sort of wiggled around and kept constant, mostly constant for the last 20 years. Because they've had stricter standards than the other states have had, and I think we should be emulating them rather than making them conform to a looser standard. But at any rate, in the most recent budget, DOE has zeroed out the Weatherization Assistance Program,
Right.
and which would help those most in need by simultaneously boosting efficiency and cutting their energy costs, and by the way, employing a lot of people. Weatherization hires tradespeople to put in storm doors, storm windows, insulation, et cetera. So what is the DOE's rationale for eliminating funding for this program?
It's simple. I was the one that made the decision, and so if there's a bad guy, I'm the guy. And the issue there was we are largely a technically driven science and engineering organization. That's what we know how to do. We're experts at that. We're very good at it. We're in all these national labs. 2/3 of all the employees of the Energy Department work in the national laboratory, and they're very good at this. The issue, therefore, gets to be what kind of return do we get for our money? We make, as best we now know, the number I was given is that we have a 20-for-1 return on investments in technology. I got a 1.5 return for the weatherization program. It was strictly a financial matter.
Well, you're very honest, and thank you for your candor. I would just close by saying that 35 years ago, my next-door neighbor in the Hudson Valley, a Vietnam veteran and entrepreneurial soul named Jan Aswood, was lighting balloons full of hydrogen in his backyard and calling up the press and trying to get them to come and see that he was making hydrogen from a barrel of water, a photovoltaic cell, and 2 electrodes in the water, and collecting hydrogen, singeing the hair off his arm by lighting these balloons full of hydrogen, but as a demonstration that a renewable, any kind of renewable, combined with water, could use hydrogen as a storage device for energy. And it seems to me that citing such a facility to both store hydrogen, which we now know how to handle much better than we did when the Hindenburg went down and is sort of the 3 Mile Island of the hydrogen era. I think we have the space shuttle powered by it. We know how to handle it much more safely, and it seems to me it would be much easier to site a hydrogen storage and generation facility that produces no waste except water when you burn the hydrogen than it would be to site a new nuclear plant. And then, in fact, you're looking for the same site. You're looking for a place away from population on a body of water. So I'm just curious, how 35 years have gone by, and since I saw my next-door neighbor doing that, and we haven't seen more of an effort in that direction. And my time's up, so I yield.
No, the Secretary may answer the question, please.
The answer to that question is we've been through over the last 35 years a real dip in the fact that oil all of a sudden went from the outlandish price of $30 to $35, which it was in 1978, down to 10 or 8 or 9, something like that. All work in this area, in research area, stopped at that point in time. Everything. And that's the issue we're dealing with.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow up on an earlier question, although your question deserves following up too, Mr. Hall. Ms. Hertha Sandlin mentioned that the department had just issued a report a couple weeks ago that wind energy could provide 20% of our nation's electrical needs by 2030. And yet, the Department of Energy's proposed budget increases the wind energy research by only $3 million. Now, this is a budget that was decimated over the period between 2000 and 2006. So what's the justification for such a low level of funding for such an important part of our nation's energy supply?
To my knowledge, a lot of the work that has been done has already been accomplished in order to create electricity from wind. That's one answer. And two, there continues to be a very substantial commitment in both Massachusetts, where Mr. Markey is from, and in Texas, relating to the new wind blade test facilities. And so there is work going on. I guess I would answer that if research work needs to be done, that's what we are good at. That's what we do, is research work, research and development.
Well,
we don't fund new...
To go from 1 or 2% of our nation's energy to 20% is a huge jump. I mean, that's as much more or maybe more than nuclear is producing. So I suggest that additional research is going to be needed to meet that level of demand, or that level of production. My second question would be, do you agree that there are tremendous gains to be made with energy efficiency?
Yes, I do.
Then would you agree to work within the administration to allow states to lead the nation in efficiency legislation, even though it may exceed federal standards, especially referring to vehicle efficiency?
I can't commit to that because I don't understand all the details of it. I'd be happy to study that particular question.
Well, what I'm asking is, would you advocate that? Because California has, and Massachusetts and other states have had trouble getting the administration to allow that sort of legislation to go forward. Honestly, if you don't agree to that, then, you know, by association, the administration stands in opposition to the most, I believe, the most effective tool we have to lowering gas prices in the long run.
Okay.
All right. Good.
Understand.
I like that kind of agreement. Now, you had mentioned to Mr. Blumenauer that you don't remember mentioning a 95% success in implementing the administration's energy policies.
That's correct.
But on the White House website, it shows that you have said that over the past 4 years, we have implemented 95% of those recommendations, 100 recommendations that are made. So that indicates in my mind that the administration's policies are flawed because they've been implemented to a large degree, and the success in terms of keeping gas prices low for whatever method, by increasing efficiency or by increasing supply, haven't been as successful. Do you have a response to that?
Well, I think that, you know, the response is that we clearly have a long-term research program in solar energy, wind, nuclear power, biofuels, carbon capture sequestration, and it's going to take a number of years to dig ourselves out of the hole that we are in. And so the fact that I am quoted as having said that this is 95% done, if I am quoted correctly by the congressman, I am wrong.
Okay, thank you. I yield back. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bodden.
Gentleman's time has expired, and there is going to be a series of roll calls in a few more minutes, and I think what might be advisable is if we could continue to question the Secretary until that time has arrived. So the Chair will recognize himself for another round of questions. Mr. Secretary, last Friday, the President was in Saudi Arabia, and at that time, he and Secretary Rice reached an agreement and a memorandum of understanding, which is, and I quote here from the agreement, intended to cooperate on the issue of appropriately sized light water nuclear reactors and fuel services arrangements for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, promoting the establishment of arrangements that would allow future civilian light water nuclear reactors deployed in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with access to reliable nuclear fuel supplies and services. Now, I don't understand, Mr. Secretary. 3 years ago, Vice President Cheney said that, and I quote, here's what he said, talking about Iran's deeply questionable nuclear program. He said, Iran is already sitting on an awful lot of oil and gas. No one can figure why they need nuclear as well to generate energy. So if that's true for Iran, why are we in the United States introducing yet more nuclear technology into the Middle East when we know that has been a source for much of the friction that exists in that region, because ultimately any country can pull out of the nuclear proliferation regime, hold on to the uranium, hold on to the plutonium, and have a nuclear weapons program with the very same light water reactor materials. Why, Mr. Secretary, is the President?
I don't know. I wasn't there, and so I can't respond to that other than saying I presume that the President has a good deal of confidence in the King and in the leadership of Saudi Arabia. It is also true that it's going on in the United Arab Emirates, where they have expressed a lot of interest in nuclear power, in solar energy, and all manner of other things.
Well, that's the point, Mr. Secretary. Saudi Arabia is 3 times the size of Texas.
Yes.
It's one big desert. It is sunny almost every day of the year.
Right.
Why aren't we having a Saudi solar cooperation agreement with the United States? Why would we introduce more dangerous nuclear materials into that region when solar energy should be the basis of our partnership with a country that says it wants to diversify from oil and gas, although Mr. Cheney would say if Iran has plenty of oil for 75 million people, Saudi Arabia has twice as much for a third of the population. Why would we introduce more nuclear power? Does that make any sense, given the volatility of that region and the ability to have solar become the future for Saudi Arabia if they want to end their oil and gas era?
I can't answer that, Mr. Chairman. I don't know. I wasn't there.
You know, I know this sounds, I'm incredulous. I can't believe that the President's Secretary of Energy doesn't have a view or have knowledge about the nuclear agreement that the United States is implementing with the Saudi Arabians, given the fact that it's your agency that is touting new research in solar, new research in renewable energy resources, that you seem to be out of the loop in terms of then what is the energy policy for what our agreement should be around the world.
That's true.
It's true.
Yes.
I just find that hard to believe. It seems as though the Secretary of State can use nuclear power plants as a short-term diplomatic tool for her use, knowing that solar energy is a better alternative for Saudi Arabia, for sure, and that our long history with transfer of nuclear materials into these Middle Eastern countries almost inevitably results in the compromise of that program and the use of those materials for our nuclear weapons program.
I am sure that Secretary Rice was not contemplating the fact that this program would be compromised. I mean, you are assuming that it's going to be compromised.
I am saying to you that
if
you look at...
I'm assuming that it's not.
If you look at Saudi Arabia, you have to say that solar should be the first resort of that country. And instead, we're sending them more nuclear power plants the same way that the world sent Iraq and Iran and North Korea nuclear power plants that ultimately turned as energy sources into weapons programs. We know the tension that exists between the Saudis and the Iranians. We know that they are trepidatious about the nuclear weapons program in Iran. Right. I don't understand why we would be fueling this tension in the Middle East by providing the beginnings of a program where we'll send nuclear materials to Saudi Arabia under the guise of an energy exchange, when my real fear here is that the Bush administration knows that this program is likely to be compromised in the future by the Saudis.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that, sir.
Well, they should know it,
well,
given...
Then we have a difference of view.
But well, how about this? Can we have an agreement that there should be a Saudi solar agreement with the United States, and that we should be sharing
If Saudi
our
Arabia-
solar technology
If
with the Saudi
Arabia
Arabians?
would like to have a solar agreement, they certainly can ask us, and we would be happy to respond.
But aren't you suspicious that the Saudis don't want a solar agreement? Because they are the
Mr.
Saudi,
Markey.
Saudi Arabia is the Saudi Arabia of solar. There it is. It sits there as a desert with sun 12 months a year, blistering hot. Why wouldn't this administration be suspicious that they're asking for nuclear rather than solar power exchange in order to meet their long-term energy needs?
There are a lot of good reasons to use nuclear power. It is less expensive than solar energy right now. We don't have solar energy that is cost competitive.
You know, do you personally believe that Saudi Arabia needs nuclear power plants?
I believe that it is wise for them to diversify their sources of energy away from oil and gas. Yes.
You know, here's the problem, Mr. Secretary, and I don't think the Bush administration is ever going to understand this, that every nuclear power plant is a generator of electricity. Yes, it is, but with a byproduct of nuclear materials that can be used for a nuclear bomb program. And that's what's going on in Saudi Arabia.
Well, that's
and the Bush administration...
That is your opinion, sir.
I know it is my opinion, but all Middle Eastern history points in that direction. And the Bush administration should be touting the dramatic breakthroughs that have been made in solar energy over the last couple of years and encouraging the Saudis to move in that direction given their geographic location, the desert nature of their population, and the leadership role that we can play in partnership with them in pointing the world in that direction and away from this nuclear fuel cycle, which is ultimately going to come back and haunt the world once again. Let me turn and recognize the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
Thank you. The Vice President famously said in 2001 that conservation may be a sign of personal virtue, but it's not a sufficient basis for a sound, comprehensive energy policy. Is that still the administration's view? That conservation is a personal virtue and is not a cornerstone of the sound?
It's certainly not my view.
I was curious, as you moved forward early in your tenure to implement the recommendations of Mr. Cheney's national energy policy, and again, our understanding is that the assertion was that much of those recommendations were in fact implemented, which, as my colleague mentioned a moment ago, you were quoted as saying on the White House website. Yet, according to the GAO, the Department of Energy has missed 34 of the 34 congressionally mandated deadlines for setting new efficiency standards for appliances and electrical equipment. Why was meeting those efficiency standards such a low priority of the Department of Energy that they missed 34 out of 34?
I can't answer that. I can tell you that one of the things that I have focused on during my 3+ years of work in that department has been management and has been the issue of trying to run things better. And we have, I think, have turned that around and have that entire program now in better shape. It's still going to be a number of years before we get caught up, but we now have it on a program that I think makes sense. To write an appliance standard is a much more difficult task than it appears to be on the surface. And it takes time. You've got to then get agreement of both the manufacturing community and the regulatory community and others that are involved. And
well,
so
I mean, it's your choice to get the agreement of the manufacturing community.
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, the administration stepped in and stopped some of the stronger standards that were already underway by the Clinton administration.
Not to my knowledge. I don't know about that. I can't speak to it.
Air conditioning standards?
I can't
You don't
speak-
know
I-
that
I
your
can't speak
department
to it.
stopped the implementation of more rigorous air conditioning standards?
Do I know that? No, I don't.
Okay? I mean, I would think that would be part of, if you're getting a handle on the management, and you were concerned that we missed 34 out of 34 standards.
Right.
That there might, and it's so hard to get agreement, that these would be things that would be pretty high priority for you to know.
I don't happen to know about air conditioning standards. I don't happen to know.
Well, what are
about
your
them.
priorities for efficiency? I mean, air conditioning, I think, is number one or number two in every area of the country.
Furnaces, they're very important in the south. They're less important in the north. Furnaces are very important. There are all kinds, dishwashers, refrigerators. I mean, it's a long list
Air
of
conditioning
things.
is number one or number two in every major region of the country, is it not?
Not to my knowledge. I don't happen to know that offhand.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you again about this cap-and-trade system. Many, if not most, of the investment community, the CAP organization, which are several Fortune 500 companies that have been urging your administration to embrace a cap-and-trade system, they believe it's necessary both from an environmental and an economic standpoint. And the people I'm listening to are the people in these cutting-edge companies who are developing advanced solar photovoltaics, enhanced geothermal, wave power, solar thermal plants, a whole host of new technology, the electrification of the automobile. What they tell me is that we are missing an economic opportunity by not adopting a cap-and-trade system. And what they tell me is that we are in a race. We're in a race against Germany, Denmark, Spain to see who's going to be developing these technologies to sell to China and India. India, when I was there, they have 400 million people that don't have access to a light bulb. They're going to want electricity.
Right.
The question is, who's going to provide them the clean energy technologies to do that? Is it going to be us, or is it going to be Spain or Germany? And right now we're losing out to those countries because they have policies that drive investment into these clean energy technologies. Now that's what the clean energy CEOs and the investment community is telling me. Why do they get this and this administration not get this as seeing this as an economic opportunity for us, and why we should lead the world? Why do they understand that, and your administration does not understand that?
I don't know how to answer it any differently than I've already answered it, Mr. Inslee. I think the question gets to be, how do we bring all of the countries of the world together? And the President has, I think, wisely developed a program for getting the largest, I think that's the largest 17 or 18 economies, the major economies of the world, to get them together to make an agreement on what the approach, what the world's goal ought to be, and what each country's goal ought to be, and he will be prepared to commit to that at that point in time. And there is a G8 meeting that is supposed to occur, I think, in early July. And if we are successful in getting a response from the other countries, this country will respond accordingly.
Well, clearly, we all have a stake in this, and everybody needs to act at some point. But there's two major flaws with that. Number one, if we'd adopted the Bush administration model of democracy, we would still be, trying to reach a global goal of everybody becoming a democracy before we just went ahead and did it in 1776 because we decided to lead the world. And I think that's the policy of America, that we ought to be leading the world. But secondly, and just as more importantly, this strategy, if you call it that, of the administration is we don't do anything until, Bangladesh signs on to an agreement,
The
is a huge,
major economies of the
huge
world.
economic failure, because we are not going to develop the clean energy technologies to sell to the world if we wait for the entire world to get on board. I look at this as losing an economic opportunity while we wait for the rest of the world. And I just don't know why the administration cannot understand that, of what it is to lose economic opportunity. Why don't you agree
I don't know
with
how to
this?
be any clearer than it was. These are the major economies of the world. I think there are 17 or 18 of them. They include places like China, India, Brazil, Mexico, and we are making some progress. Good.
So you're willing to give away a market to sell China clean energy technology. You're willing to give that away to Spain and Germany,
Of course I'm
who
not.
are now taking advantage of our failure to act on this.
Not in my view.
Well, that's what's happening. Germany, we used to be the leader in solar photovoltaic. Now Germany is, and the reason is they've adopted a cap-and-trade system. They've adopted a feed-in tariff, something I'll be introducing shortly, and we've dropped back to number 5 or 6. And now they are leading in selling product to China because this administration has failed to act, and they're giving away those markets. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York State.
Thank you,
Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary. Thank you for this conversation. Our office in Putnam County, New York, in the 19th District, received a call lately from a woman who was all excited about buying a flex fuel vehicle, and she asked my staff, where can I get some flex fuel? And we had to tell her there are only a couple of pumps in New York State, even though there are more than 200,000 vehicles, I believe, sold by Ford and GM. We've sort of induced people to build vehicles that can burn E85, allowed them to advertise it on TV as a green thing to do. You can help the environment by buying an E85 car,
Right.
and allowed the oil companies to continue to not provide that kind of blend. In fact, when the oil executives, the top CEOs of the 5 top companies came before this committee, I asked them in my brief questions, now that you've made the biggest profit in the history of the world, of any corporation in the world, would you commit to putting at least one biofuels pump at every station that you own? Not franchise stations, but stations that you actually own. And every one of them said no. And I said, why? And they said, we don't know if the demand will be there. And I said, haven't you heard of flex fuel vehicles? Haven't you heard of advertising? I think they may need some help from your department. And I know that you're all, PhDs and researchers, and that, things like this, or efficiency, or weatherization may fall below the level of interest of a lot of people who work at the Department of Energy. But we have a situation where last week, I checked on the internet, ethanol was selling for $1.97. It's gone up a little bit this week, but it's still somewhere between a half and a third the price of gasoline. So if we've got these vehicles on the road, we've incentivized a production capacity, some of which, by the way, is in danger of going bankrupt, and new ethanol or cellulosic ethanol projects are in danger of not being built because they're seen as weakening in the market. What can we do, or what can your department do to make sure that the infrastructure exists to bring that fuel to market? Because that would have an immediate impact on the price of fuel.
We can work and are working with the oil companies as well as the auto companies to get more flex fuel vehicles made, and to get the oil companies to include the E85 pump and/or other pumps available.
Thank you, sir. I hope that works as fast as possible, and I'm proud to say that West Point in my district, after some discussion with the commander of the post and his staff, have decided to put in a 5,000-gallon E85 tank underground and to sell that fuel to flex fuel vehicles in their motor pool and at the commissary where the faculty and the West Point community buy fuel. And the more we can do to especially have these large facilities that move large quantities, like school bus fleets that might be able to burn a blend of biodiesel, or UPS, or big shipping companies and so on, to pull the string through the tube so that there's more demand to help create more production on the other end. And I would encourage you to do everything you can to try to make that happen.
Thank you very much.
I thank you. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's time has expired, and all time has expired. Mr. Secretary, we thank you so much for coming here today. We know that you have an unenviable task. You are the President's principal energy advisor, and you have the responsibility of defending indefensible positions, which are created by President Bush and Vice President Cheney. And we recognize the difficulty of the position which you're placed in here, because those positions are indefensible. In conclusion, on the issue of deploying the Strategic Petroleum Reserve beginning this Memorial Day weekend, you're arguing that there is no natural disaster. President Bush argues that there is no international crisis in the Middle East, and therefore the conditions do not exist that would require the deployment of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I could not disagree more. I think we are in an economic crisis right now. It is largely fueled by high oil prices that are affecting consumers, affecting business all across our country. You are right. It is not a natural disaster-created oil spike. It is a Bush administration-driven price spike in oil and gas. They have had no. I know you disagree.
Okay.
But all evidence points to the fact that oil has gone from $30 a barrel to $135 a barrel during the 7.5 years that President Bush and Vice President Cheney have been implementing their secret energy plan. And that secret energy plan is one that has not included the robust investment in renewable energy resources, wind and solar. The administration is still opposing the extension of the wind and solar energy tax breaks. And even as we hit the Memorial Day weekend, the Bush administration is still refusing to sell oil from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a way of sending a signal to the marketplace that we are not going to stand on the sidelines. We are going to actively intervene to protect consumers and businesses. And I understand your position. You're in a difficult one as the Secretary of Energy when the President and Vice President are committed to ending their administration as they began it, without a real energy policy. And it's bad news for our economy, but I think drivers should expect, as they head to gas stations across the country today and tomorrow to get ready for the Memorial Day weekend, to pay the highest prices that any Americans have ever paid for oil at the pump. And I think it is the responsibility of the Bush administration to deploy the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in order to protect them. Again, Mr. Secretary, I thank you for being here. With that, this hearing is adjourned.